Hi guys, so for my first video, I am going to tackle not why you should read, but why you shouldn't let certain things stop you from reading the Malazan series. Because based on what I've seen largely online or in interactions with my friends, it's that they have heard about Malazan, they know a lot of good things about Malazan, but they're still afraid to pick up. Before I start with that though, quick disclaimer, Malazan is not a series for everybody. It is, in my opinion, there are two types of people who mainly would enjoy Malazan. So first of all, if you are really into epic fantasy and really into massive worlds and you like to discover a lot of different cultures and geographies, and there are multiple different sentient species in fact in Malazan, and each of them have their own cultures, and it's an incredibly vast world with a lot of characters, a lot of locations, and it's really well developed. So if that's something that interests you, and also, in fact, if you are into role-playing games like D&D, then this might also be a really great fit for you, because role-playing games is actually how the Malazan worlds developed and started. The second type of people, which is what the category that I fall into, even though I like epic fantasies and I like discovering worlds, but that is not the deciding criteria in me liking a book. I don't know if you know this already, but Stephen Erickson has already stated that Malazan is effectively a really long appeal for compassion. And what he does is he tries to portray the suffering of the characters in his books and sort of give a voice to the downtrodden. I personally read the series because I feel like there are just so many people going through so much in Malazan, and their struggles and their issues, they deserve to be heard. That sentiment would also be something that makes you really like Malazan. If you don't fall into either of these two categories, I mean, I am not omniscient, so you might still like the series. So definitely go ahead and try the first couple of books if you feel like it. If you don't still find any reason to continue with it after the first two books though, then that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. Like I said, Malazan is not for everybody. And if you're looking for more of a relaxing read or something that's more easily accessible, that's totally fine. That's your reading choice. It's all good. So moving on to what I was talking about, the obstacles mainly. So the first thing we are going to talk about is something that you've heard a lot about in Malazan, which is that the author literally drops you into the middle of the series with no exposition and you have no idea what's going on. So, well, for some people that actually works out well, because I know of Malazan readers who really enjoy sort of being thrust into the middle of the action and then themselves figuring out what's going on, sort of. But for readers like me, who just likes to know about the world and likes to sort of have everything in her grasp when she's reading the action, it can be a lot more difficult. And so there are two ways to deal with this. First of all, there are multiple online resources which you can use to give yourself a sort of a better background before you start these books. That's what I did, because when I first picked up the Gardens of the Moon, I couldn't really get into it because I had no idea what was going on, and there are also just so many terms and names and things which they're just completely unfamiliar words, and it can be hard to keep track of. So what I did try on my second read through, and that's when I really got into the series, is that there are articles by Tor and one on Imgur. I will link those down below, which give you an introduction to the first two books. And each of these is meant to be read before you start the book itself. I myself am also planning to make a video on like a sort of before you read video for each of the books, starting with Gardens of the Moon and then Dead House Gates. If you do have any questions while reading, what you should do is definitely head over to the Malazan subreddit and ask all the questions that you want. The people there are very nice, they're very welcoming to new readers, and they're always willing to answer your questions without giving you spoilers. And the spoiler tags there are really well maintained. Besides this, I also find it helpful when I'm really confused about what's happening. to follow the Tor reread alongside the book. So, Tor.com has done a reread of all of the books in the Malazan series, including, I believe, almost all of the companion books. I'm not sure about the latest releases, but most of the companion books at least are definitely there. So what I did not read this in the first few books, but in the later books when I was lost on certain occasions, what I did is I used to read a few chapters and then go to Tor.com and read the chapter summaries in the reread and just sort of condense what happened in the last few chapters and keep it in my mind. The second way to deal with this, so there will be points in the books where resources or no resources, you are going to feel lost. And the second thing that you need to do is that you need to remember that it's okay to be lost and it's okay to not keep track of the whole story. With Malazan, the best way to enjoy it, in my opinion, is to just read what's happening on the page and sort of live in the moment and enjoy what's happening right now. Like, enjoy the current conversation or the philosophy or just the prose and the battles and just sort of live in the moment. It's fine if you do not remember all of the things that are going on. If it's important enough, it will fall into place. And even if you miss certain things, if you miss certain plot lines, and if you don't completely understand part of the story, that's fine. And this is why, because Malazan is so dense, the advantage is that even if you follow like 50% of the plot lines and remember like 10 odd characters, it can still be one of the best reads you've done in a long time. The second problem, which is somewhat related to the first problem, is that the problem of continuing to care about the characters. And this is something I think happens because Malazan introduces a lot of characters. And like I mentioned before, Malazan is something of a plea for compassion, where you're shown the suffering of all of these characters and you're meant to feel compassionate for them and identify with them. And Stephen Erickson does an amazing job of portraying them in a way that would make you feel for them. But the problem is, and I definitely find it a problem for myself personally, is that a person can only care so much. Like, I mean, if there are 500 different people that I am supposed to feel really, really bad for, after a point, I just get numb to their suffering and I sort of don't have the capacity or strength to continue to care about more and more and more suffering anymore. At some point, I'm just like, nothing is ever going to get better and this is just pointless. What is the point of me caring? And I just go into that spiral. Personally, a good way to deal with that is to take breaks between books. And I have not been reading Malazan series continuously. What I did, I think I took a break after the third book, which was Memories of Ice, and after that, after every one or two books, and after every book, in fact, I think. And so I interspersed Malazan with other lighter reads. So I read Riria in between the Malazan series. I think I also read Shades of Magic. I'm not sure how light that is. Yes, let's say semi-light. It's definitely way lighter than Malazan. So I read that in between Malazan. And so what I find is if I stop after a book and I read something else and then I come back to the next book and approach it like a new book. And you can do that because most books in the Malazan series, except I think the last two books or three books sort of, except those, most of the books are sort of standalones in the sense that they are like a particular chapter in the history of the Malazan Empire. So while the story of these people continues, it's a completion of one point in the books. So you can just drop it and pick up the next story later. Often the next story will also be located in a completely different location with a whole different cast of characters, and then it's just easy for you to approach it like a completely new book. And I think that is also something that's helpful. And so what this does is that it helps you feel a little refreshed, and then you get a little distance from all of the emotion you went through in the previous few books, and so you're not emotionally saturated anymore. The other thing that you do need to remember in this whole dealing with too many characters and character attachments thing is that your characters are not always going to get great endings. And it is important that you don't get too invested in what is going to happen to these characters. My personal favorite character, I'm not going to name names to avoid spoilers, but my personal favorite character had an incredibly unceremonious exit after like one book, and that did not feel great to me, and it drove me crazy for a while, like trying to figure out whether this character ever comes back or if there's like anything else in the later books which will give me some closure. But that does not work out well. The characters that you like, also just enjoy them as long as you exist, but when if they do disappear randomly, you will kind of have to let them go. It's a bit like real life in that way, and I feel like I'm sounding like a philosopher here, but that's just true. But the thing is that there will be so many great characters for you to love. I think letting go of a few of them whose arcs are not as fulfilling as you would like, I think that's fine. And I think that's part of the charm of Malazan personally. That it's something that is so close, like those features are something that is so like real life. It really makes you appreciate the whole in the moment thing. That like enjoy these characters, enjoy these events while you can, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next page. The third thing, and this is something which I don't really have tips to deal with, is the time investment. And admittedly, like Malazan is a huge series. It is the largest fantasy series by word count, as far as I know. Except with Wheel of Time, I think if you include New Spring, then Wheel of Time has a larger word count than Malazan. However, if you're including New Spring, you should also be including the Malazan companion books, and then Malazan with the companion books beats, I think, pretty much any other series by a large margin. So yes, it's going to take time. These are huge books, it's a huge series, and it is a serious investment. It probably helps if you're somebody who is able to read multiple books at once, and then if you're reading other books in between the series, then that probably feels like a bit of a less of an investment. Personally, I just try to binge read on the weekends and get like large chunks done together because that makes me feel better. Also, I'm a fast reader, that helps slow readers. It will take you longer, there's nothing to do with that. But what I can do is I can give you a sense of the scope of Malazan so that you understand why the time investment is required. And so I think that Malazan is not a fantasy series which should be compared to something like a Stormlight Archive or even a Wheel of Time in terms of scope. In terms of vastness, maybe? In terms of scope, not. In terms of scope, you need to think, actually, I think, more along the lines of the Odyssey or the Iliad or the Indian epics, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. I think that is the kind of epic fantasy which Steven Erikson was looking at when he created his series. And then the idea is that this is a world where there are multiple layers upon layers of history, right? And then, so it's not just the story of, let's say, a soldier in World War II. It's a story which includes, I don't know, the time from the breaking up of the continents and the Ice Age and how the division of resources through the entire geographical history of the world led to the creation of our current countries, which then led to further divisions, which eventually caused the World War I and then World War II and then the soldier in that context. So there are multiple layers upon layers of history which play into this current story. And that is the scope of Malazan. And that is why, if you think about it, you 10 books is really the minimum that is possible. And Stephen Erickson gets to these 10 books with the minimum amount of explainers that you can, because he gives you explanations of what's happening only when you absolutely need it. But he just cuts out the exposition and the background details kind of exposition, and then he manages to make it 10 books, which is a I think fitting that in 10 books is still a pretty great accomplishment, actually. And so what you need to remember is that, like I said, so the Greek epics, right? The Iliad, the Odyssey, these are not easy reads. These are not considered great epics because because they're very accessible, but they're considered great epics despite the lack of accessibility. And I think that is the category in which Malazan falls. That is not to say that it's better or worse in some way than the other books. I'm not saying it's somewhere in a higher stature, like whether it's better or worse for you depends on whether you're looking for accessibility or not. But then, Malazan is not very accessible, but that is for very good reasons. And the time investment that you put into Malazan, if the things that Malazan offers, the vast world, the incredible amount of depth in character, in philosophy, and the beautiful prose, if that is what you're looking for, then your payoff is going to be more than sufficient to make you feel like the time investment was worth it. And so don't be afraid of the time investment, because Malazan as a series is worth it. And so I hope that you at least give Malazan a shot, despite the obstacles, despite the relatively higher level of difficulty and learning curve. Malazan more than makes up for it. And so I hope I have done something to mitigate your fears, or I don't know, maybe I have enhanced them more. Well, I will end my video here. So whether I helped you or harmed you in starting up with Malazan, let me know in the comments. And yeah, other than that, like if you like the video, dislike if you dislike the video, and subscribe if you want to, I guess. And hope to see you next time.